I came home early and found my husband in the bathtub with my sister. I locked the door from the outside. Then I called my brother-in-law and told him, "You better get over here right now." 15 minutes later, he showed up, but he did not come alone. My name is Audrey, and at 34 years old, I never expected to be standing on the wrong side of a locked door in my own house, listening to my life fall apart. I have always been the responsible one, the planner, the fixer. Meanwhile, my younger sister Brittany was the golden child who could do no wrong. I built a career as a creative director and bought this beautiful home in Seattle, while Brittany drifted through life relying on her charm and our parents' money. Today, that dynamic was about to change forever. It was 2:14 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I was supposed to be on a flight to Chicago for a client pitch, but a mechanical failure grounded the plane. I decided to come home and surprise my husband, Grant. I did not text him. I just wanted to curl up on the couch with him and forget about work. When I walked into the foyer, the house was unusually quiet. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy. I kicked off my heels on the marble floor, and that is when I heard it. The faint rhythmic sound of water splashing and the hum of the jacuzzi jets coming from our master suite upstairs. I frowned because Grant told me he had back-to-back meetings all day. I walked up the floating staircase, my stocking feet making no sound. As I got closer to the bedroom, the sounds became distinct. There was laughter, a high-pitched giggling that I had known my entire life. It was Brittany. My stomach dropped, but my mind refused to believe it. Maybe she was just visiting. Maybe the sound was carrying from somewhere else. But as I reached the open door of the master bedroom, the trail of clothes told a different story. My husband's tie was draped over the armchair, and my sister's bright red dress was in a heap on the floor. The bathroom door was cracked open just an inch, letting steam escape. I crept closer, holding my breath, and peered through the gap. The sight burned itself into my retinas instantly. Grant was in the tub, and Brittany was sitting across from him. They were drinking my expensive champagne. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a scene of domestic comfort built on my betrayal. I didn't burst in screaming. Instead, I did what I do best. I acted with cold precision. I quietly closed the bathroom door and turned the lock from the outside. The click was loud in the silent room. The laughter inside stopped instantly. The silence following the click of the lock lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then came the explosion of noise. The handle rattled violently, followed by a heavy thud as Grant threw his weight against the solid oak. "Audrey, let me out," he shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of shock and fear. It was a rhythmic thud, thud, thud that matched the beating of my own heart. Not out of fear, but out of a strange, cold adrenaline. Brittany's voice joined in, shrill and demanding. "Let me out, you psycho. My clothes are out there. You cannot keep us in here." I closed my eyes and let a small, humorless smile touch my lips. Just 24 hours ago, Grant had kissed my forehead at the door, his suitcase packed with heavy coats. He looked me in the eye and said, "Chicago is freezing this time of year. I will miss you, honey." At that exact same time, Brittany had sent a photo to our family group chat of a cucumber water glass, captioned "Spa Day. Self-care needed." Lies. Just layers upon layers of cheap, predictable lies. They thought they were so clever, coordinating their stories, thinking I was too busy closing deals to notice the inconsistencies. But they forgot that my job involves noticing the details everyone else misses. The pounding intensified. I pulled my phone from my blazer pocket, my fingers hovering over the screen. The background was still a photo of Grant and me from our anniversary. I swiped it away without hesitation. I opened my messages with Damon, Brittany's husband. We had not spoken much lately, aside from polite nods at family gatherings, but I knew he was the only other person in this family who valued loyalty over appearances. I typed quickly, "Come to my house immediately, do not ask questions." Then I added a second line, "Bring the red package." I hit send and watched the status turn to read almost instantly. Damon was an architect. He was precise, punctual, and he knew exactly what the red package contained. It was a fail-safe we had discussed once, half joking over scotch at Christmas 2 years ago. We never thought we would actually need to use it. Inside the bathroom, the aggression shifted to bargaining. Grant's voice dropped an octave, trying to sound reasonable. "Baby, come on. It is not what it looks like. We were just talking. I slipped in the tub by accident and Brittany was helping me up. Please just unlock the door and we can explain everything. Explain. That was rich. I took a step away from the door, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor purposefully loud, so they would know I was still there, listening. I walked over to the nightstand where Grant kept his expensive watch collection. I picked up his favorite Rolex, the one I bought him when he got his honorary promotion. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of the gold. You have 15 minutes, Grant, I said, loud enough for them to hear but keeping my voice steady. Use them to come up with a better lie than slipping in the tub. And Brittany, I hope you enjoy the steam. It is good for the pores. I walked out of the bedroom and stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at the foyer. My house had never looked more beautiful. The afternoon light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was peaceful out here, but behind that locked door, I had just started a war, and unlike them, I had brought ammunition. Grant's tactic shifted with terrifying speed. The aggressive pounding stopped and was replaced by a soft knuckles rap against the wood. When he spoke again, his voice was dripping with that condescending calmness he used whenever I questioned his spending habits. Audrey, baby, please listen to reason, he said. You are blowing this out of proportion. Brittany felt faint. She has had those dizzy spells lately. Remember? She almost collapsed on the tile. I was just helping her get into the water to cool down. I did not want her to crack her head open. It was a lie so lazy it was almost insulting. He was trying to gaslight me through 3 inches of solid oak. He actually expected me to believe that the remedy for a fainting spell was stripping naked and drinking vintage champagne. He was banking on my history of being the fixer, the one who smooths things over to avoid a scene. But the Audrey who fixed things had died the moment I saw his hand on her arm. Brittany, however, had no interest in being calm. I could hear her pacing on the tile, her voice rising to a shriek. You are going to pay for this. Audrey, wait until Mom hears about this. You are always so jealous of me. Just because you have a house and a career doesn't mean you can treat people like prisoners. I ignored her. I walked down to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands weren't shaking. In fact, I had never felt more steady. Exactly 14 minutes later, a set of headlights swept across the living room wall. A black SUV pulled into the driveway. Damon stepped out, looking every bit the weary architect, carrying a thick red envelope. He didn't look confused. He looked like a man who had finally received the call he had been dreading for months. I met him at the front door. He didn't say hello. He just held up the envelope. I checked the drawer, Audrey, he said, his voice flat. All the bank statements and the hotel receipts were exactly where you said they would be. He looked past me toward the stairs, where the muffled sound of Grant's shouting was still audible. Are they up there? I nodded. In the tub, I replied. Damon let out a long, slow breath. Then let's finish this. We walked up the stairs together, the silence of the house contrasting with the rising panic behind the master suite door. Damon didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the bathroom door, stood shoulder to shoulder with me, and tapped the red envelope against the wood. The shouting inside stopped instantly. Grant must have recognized the heavy, deliberate footsteps of another man. Audrey, Grant called out, his voice trembling now. Who is out there? Is that the police? I didn't answer. I simply turned the key and pushed the door open. The steam billowed out into the bedroom, carrying the scent of my expensive bath oils. Grant and Brittany were both still in the tub, clutching towels to their chests, their faces pale and eyes wide with a terror that finally matched the magnitude of their betrayal. Damon stepped forward, his shadow looming over the edge of the bath. He didn't look at Brittany's tears. He didn't look at Grant's pathetic attempts to cover himself. He simply opened the red envelope and let the contents flutter down onto the surface of the water. Bank statements, credit card receipts from a hotel in Napa, and photos of them together at a restaurant 3 towns over. All of it began to soak in the soapy water, the ink blurring but the truth remaining crystal clear. I saw the hotel receipts from last month, Brittany, Damon said, his voice deep and steady, devoid of any warmth. I saw the text messages on the iPad. I just needed to see this to make sure I was not crazy. He looked at Grant with pure disgust. You two deserve each other. The shame in the room was palpable. Grant tried to muster some authority, puffing out his chest despite being wrapped in a towel. You can't just break in here and throw papers at us. This is harassment, I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound that cut through the humidity. Harassment. Grant, you are in my house, in my tub, with my sister. I turned to the door and gestured to the two men who had been waiting in the hallway. My personal lawyer, Ms. Parker, and a private investigator. Ms. Parker stepped into the room, holding a tablet. Actually, Grant, it is perfectly legal, she said calmly. This residence is owned solely by my client. You are currently engaging in adulterous behavior, which violates the morality clause in your prenuptial agreement. These images and your current location are simply necessary documentation for the imminent divorce proceedings. Smile. Brittany looked past the lawyer and locked eyes with Damon. I expected her to cry or beg for forgiveness. I expected her to run to him, but she just froze. She saw the two police officers standing behind him, their hands resting near their belts, and she realized the gravity of the situation. Damon, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the jets. Damon, please let me explain. Damon did not step into the room. He stood in the doorway like a statue, towering over the scene. He looked at his wife of 3 years standing naked next to her sister's husband, and his expression remained terrifyingly blank. There was no rage. There was no heartbreak. It was the look of a man who had already grieved the death of his marriage long before he walked into this room. Save your breath, Brittany, Damon said. I saw the messages. You two deserve each other. The shame in the room was palpable. Grant tried to muster some authority, puffing out his chest despite being wrapped in a towel. You brought the cops, he spat, looking at me. You really are a cold-hearted witch, Audrey. We were just comforting each other because you are so emotionally unavailable. I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound that cut through the humidity. Comforting each other, I repeated. Is that what you call it? I turned to the officers. Officers, I would like these two individuals removed from my property immediately. They do not live here, and their presence is causing me significant distress. Grant's jaw dropped. You cannot kick me out. I live here. This is my house too. I shook my head slowly, savoring the moment. No, Grant. You just sleep here. And as of this moment, your lease has expired. The transformation from cowering adulterer to self-righteous victim took Grant exactly 30 seconds. He scrambled into his trousers, hopping on one foot while still shouting orders. He did not even button his shirt properly before he turned his aggression toward the officers. Officer, I demand you arrest this woman immediately, he bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She locked us in here against our will. That is false imprisonment. That is kidnapping. I know my rights. It was a bold strategy. He was trying to pivot the narrative from his infidelity to my reaction. He wanted to make the lock on the door the crime, rather than the betrayal that happened behind it. He looked at the police with wide, pleading eyes, channeling every ounce of his charm that had once fooled me. You have to understand, my wife is not well. She is delusional. But the officers didn't move. They had already seen the deed to the house and the prenuptial agreement. They simply gestured toward the stairs. Move it, sir. Now. Grant had not slept in a week, or at least he looked like it. Beside him, Brittany clutched her chest, trying to hide her face with her hair. She was barefoot on the asphalt because she had been forbidden from taking the shoes that were technically marital assets purchased with my money. I walked calmly through the master bedroom and out onto the private balcony that overlooked the driveway. The cool afternoon breeze felt cleansing against my skin. I leaned against the wrought iron railing, the cold metal grounding me. From up here, they looked like ants, small, insignificant ants who had bitten the wrong person. Grant looked up and saw me. For a moment, I saw a flash of hatred in his eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by the realization of his reality. He shouted something, but the wind carried it away. He looked at his car, a sleek Porsche parked near the fountain, and reached into his pocket. His face fell. The keys were in the bowl on the foyer table inside. He was stranded. Brittany was sobbing openly now. She realized there was no Uber coming to save her. She turned to Damon, who had walked out behind the officers. She reached for his arm, but he sidestepped her with a grace that was almost athletic. He walked past her to his own truck, got in, and started the engine. He did not look back. I raised my wine glass in a silent toast. It was not a toast to their health or happiness. It was a toast to the silence they were leaving behind. The police officer pointed down the long driveway, indicating that they needed to keep moving off the property line. As they began the long, humiliating walk down the hill toward the main gate, dragging their feet on the pavement, I took the final sip of my wine. It tasted like justice, rich, complex, and leaving a warm feeling in my chest. The trash had finally taken itself out. I walked back inside from the balcony, and the house felt different. It was lighter, as if the very air had been purified by their departure. But I knew the silence was only temporary. The mechanism of my family's dysfunction was predictable, like a clockwork machine. When the golden child falls, the enabler is summoned to cushion the landing. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water, this time needing a clear head for round 2. My phone began to vibrate on the marble countertop. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was, but I looked anyway. The screen lit up with the word mother. Not mom, not mommy, just mother, a title she demanded but rarely earned. I let it ring 3 times. I took a sip of water. I adjusted my silk cuff. Then I slid my thumb across the screen and put it on speaker. Audrey Elizabeth. The voice on the other end shrieked before I could even say hello. Have you lost your mind? I just got off the phone with your sister. She is hysterical. She is standing on the side of the road barefoot. How could you be so cruel? I leaned against the counter, listening to the familiar cadence of her rage. It was always like this in Patricia's world. Brittany's actions were never the problem, only my reactions to them. She slept with my husband, mother, I said, keeping my voice flat. In my house. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Patricia snapped. It was a mistake. People make mistakes. Audrey, no, you do not throw family out on the street like garbage. You do not humiliate your sister and your husband in front of the entire neighborhood. Do you have any idea what Mrs. Higgins is going to say at the club tomorrow? You have ruined our reputation. There it was. The core of the issue. It was not about my heartbreak or the betrayal of her son-in-law. It was about her reputation at the country club. They ruined their own reputation. I replied. I just expedited the process. And they are not on the street. They are walking toward the gate. I am sure Grant can call one of his drinking buddies to pick them up, since you raised a daughter who does not know how to call an Uber. Audrey, you listen to me right now, Patricia shouted, her voice trembling with indignation. You will let them back in. You will apologize. And you will sit down and discuss this like adults. Marriage is about compromise. You cannot just throw Grant away because he stumbled. He did not stumble, mother, I said, cutting her off. He fell into a jacuzzi with his sister-in-law, and I am not compromising on my dignity. You are a cold, vindictive girl, Patricia spat. You always have been. You think just because you have money, you can control everyone. Well, you are going to fix this. Do you hear me? Fix this right now or… I did not wait for the rest. I pressed the end call button and blocked the number. For the first time in 34 years, the house was finally, truly quiet. I sat in my living room, allowing the silence to settle around me. The battle in the house was over, but the war in the courtrooms was just beginning. Over the next few months, Grant and Brittany learned a brutal lesson in the difference between perceived value and actual ownership. Grant operated under the delusion that access to my lifestyle was the same as owning it. He was a passenger in a vehicle he didn't know how to drive, let alone repair. In the mediation room, the truth finally came out. Grant hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been reckless. He had signed contracts he didn't read, claimed assets he didn't understand, and fought a war against a woman whose arsenal he hadn't bothered to inspect. He had been padding his own lifestyle with company funds, assuming I was too busy closing deals to notice. My lawyer, Ms. Parker, systematically dismantled his every claim. Because of the morality clause and the ironclad prenuptial agreement, he walked away with nothing but the clothes he had managed to grab that day. Brittany fared no better. Damon, the man who valued loyalty over appearances, filed for divorce the very next day. He cut off her credit cards and reclaimed the apartment they lived in, which was owned by his family's trust. The golden child, who had spent her life relying on her charm and our parents' money, suddenly found that charm has a very low exchange rate in the real world. A year later, I received a photograph from a friend. It was taken through the window of a rundown diner in a grimy industrial suburb. In the grain of the digital zoom, I saw a man in a stained apron wiping down a greasy table. It was Grant. He wasn't the CEO anymore. He was a busboy working for minimum wage. In the background, pouring coffee for a truck driver, was a woman with dull, unwashed hair. Brittany. They were still together, not out of love, but out of a shared shackle of debt they could never outrun. I looked at the picture for exactly 5 seconds. I expected to feel a surge of triumph, or perhaps a twinge of pity. But I felt nothing. It was like looking at a photo of strangers. I turned my phone off and looked out the window of my new office. I had stopped seeking validation from people who were committed to misunderstanding me. The highest form of self-respect is knowing when to cut your losses, whether that means a toxic marriage, a parasitic sister, or enabling parents. The best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's flourishing so completely that they become nothing more than a ghost in your rearview mirror.